Hey everyone, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. To stay up to date with the latest end times content, make sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube right now. The clip you're about to watch is from our weekly Tipping Point show. To get the full show and other end times content from great teachers like Greg Laurie, Dr. Mark Hitchcock, and myself, join us as a member on endtimes.com for $7 a month. Enjoy this clip. I want to talk about Israel. I want to talk about the end times. That's what we do here on endtimes.com, is just talk about a lot of current event stuff. What's happening right now in Russia and the Ukraine. Tell me, beginning with, I guess, Russia and the Ukraine, is there anything prophetic about that in your mind related to current events and what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the majority of the rabbis understand Gog as connected to the land of Russia. And so obviously anything that goes on in that region is super significant, right? Gog is described as someone who comes from the far north, Ezekiel 38:15. Oh. And Jewish thought the dwelling place and stronghold of the forces of evil is from the north. And so from, Jewish tradition is very clear that, it's almost unanimous that Gog is connected to Russia. And this, and so what's interesting is this, though, there is one of the greatest Jewish scholars to ever live was known as the Vilna of Gaon, and he was an Alui, he was a genius. And this is, and he's speaking prophetically, this is what he says. He says, when you see the Russian Navy pass through the Bosphorus on the way to the Mediterranean by the means of the Dardanelles, it will be time to put on Shabbat clothes, meaning the Messiah is coming soon.
Oh my gosh.
So, I mean, when you hear something like one of the greatest, most revered Jewish scholars that lived, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, say something like that, and you look at what's going on in world events, you're like, okay, something is going on here.
Well, the Gog is interesting. You said that. I preached a message last weekend at Fellowship Church. We go here in Grapevine, Texas, and I was talking about, is Vladimir Putin Gog? And some of my friends, like Dr. Mark Hitchcock, he says he's Gog-esque. You can't definitively say he's Gog. However, my comment during my message was, if you ask me to, if Ezekiel 38 is a now prophecy, Vladimir Putin is Gog. I mean, because Gog is a person, Magog is a land, the other places are regions. The nations of Ezekiel 38 are places where he has control, the other nations listed there. But I really appreciate you saying that in the Jewish mind, Gog is Russia, because you have a lot of Western theologians who argue with that, and they'll say Gog has nothing to do with Russia. Gog is this, whatever. But if you look at the realities of it right now, the Gog and then the Magog nations of the Stan states, you have Turkey, Iran. These nations are all aligned with Russia, and they all hate Israel. So
yeah, and there's this old tradition, Jewish understanding that Meshech and Tubal were in Russia, somewhere located in Russia. And there was this Rabbi Ibn Shaprut, who said, he wrote a letter to this group of this nation called the Khazaria, and there's this whole nation that converted in what's now Russia or Eastern Europe to believe converted to Judaism. And he wrote to this leader of Khazaria, and calling him, and this is how he addressed him. He addressed him as the leader of Meshech and Tubal.
Huh. Wow.
Right? So, I mean, there's numerous references that connect back. And from a Jewish perspective, Gog is connected to, is European. He's a European leader. He's a descendant of Armilius, which is connected to Romulus, which is the founder of Rome, which is the fourth kingdom. I don't know if we want to, of Daniel's beasts, if we want to go into all there. but so in Jewish tradition, he has to be kind of Western. He has to be a descendant of Esau and Edom. That's a whole nother interesting thing. All the end time, all the 10 horns and the 11th horn mentioned in Daniel are all descendants of Edom and Esau. And Magog, on the other hand, is seen as a nation that's descended from Japheth, one of the descendants of Noah. So you have someone from Esau, Edom, which represents the West in Jewish thought, ruling over a land that's primarily of Japheth.
And is that what you see today with Gog, Magog, all the nations there?
Yeah. And again, Persia would be one of those nations that are the descendants of Japheth, right? So it's no surprise that in this end, you kind of see this you kind of see this going on. You actually see it in the book of Esther, which just passed, right? So you have Haman, who is a descendant of Esau and a descendant of Amalek, being a key ruler in Persia, and Persia is a descendant of Japheth, right? So you have someone who is an outsider coming in,
wow,
stirring it up to destroy the Jewish people. This is exactly the picture of what's going to happen in the end. And Ezekiel mentions Persia as being one of the nations that are going to come in the battle of Gog and Magog to destroy. But the interesting thing is that in Hebrew, again, in our last show, we talked about the numerics, right? So the interesting thing is that in Hebrew, Gog and Magog, Gogu Magog, has a numerical value of 70. And that's very significant because 70, according to the 5 books of Moses, 70 descendants of Jacob went down to Egypt. There are 70 nations biblically. So the way the biblical worldview is that there's 70 nations other than Israel that exist, and the picture of Gog and Magog is the 70 nations coming against Israel in the end of days. And this number 70 also ties back to the Tower of Babel, because when God confused the languages, he confused them into the 70 languages that become the 70 nations.
Wow.
And so this leader of Gog and Magog it's the same spirit and the same worldview as the Tower of Babel, that we're going to build in order to overthrow God, rebel against God, his plans and purposes. And that's the idea of what the thinking of these end times enemies.
Well, that's exactly what you see happening right now. I want to thank you for watching this Tipping Point clip, and I want you to subscribe to the channel. I want you, if you're not a subscriber, go ahead and click subscribe there. And thank you for watching and subscribing. I want you to join our Tipping Point community at endtimes.com. For $7 a month, you can subscribe, and you have a 7-day free trial. So if you just want to check it out for 7 days, go on endtimes.com, check us out for 7 days, but I can promise you, you're going to love the content. You're going to be getting the Tipping Point show, the full show, every single week, as well as articles and video content from great teachers like Greg Laurie and Mark Hitchcock, and of course myself. Be sure to subscribe to be notified when we release more videos like this. God bless you.